Hello everyone, welcome to Barry's Book Reviews. This is episode number 29. I haven't recorded any videos for several months because I was teaching the spring and summer semester at my university and I had lots of classes and lots of students, so I just didn't really have time for any other little hobbies on the side. But it's a vacation now, so hopefully I'll have time to make some more videos during the vacation. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to try and make some more videos. Anyway, let's get down to business. So what book are we talking about today? Today's book is a novel called The Human Jungle by Cho Chongnae. Cho Chongnae often spells the English translation of his name on several of his books. The spelling is always slightly different, but Cho Chongnae. And the translated version was published by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton. The Fultons have been translating novels and short stories for a very long time at this point. And they're one of the some of the translators who are most at the forefront over the past couple of decades and introducing more and more Korean novels to Western readers, and we should celebrate their work and their contribution. And there's some other Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton reviews on the channel as well, so please go and listen to those if you have time. The Korean title for today's novel is 정글만리, and the original version of this book was published, I think it was published in 3 separate volumes, and the last volume was published in 2013. This English translation was published in 2016, and it collects all 3 volumes. So it's the entire work, the entire series. And Cho Chongnae is famous for writing these long series. It's quite a long book. It's just under 400 pages. So it was quite a time-consuming book to read. But anyway, Cho Chongnae, I think I've reviewed one of his other novels on the channel already, a much shorter work, also translated by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton, called How in Heaven's Name. Fantastic novel, fantastic story. But Cho Chongnae is still, I think, one of Korea's most famous novelists. He's a very old man now. His books have sold over 10 million copies, which is remarkable, really. He's won several of the country's, prestigious literary awards, and he's like I said, he's 75, I think 75, 76, and he just has this very extensive body of work. And he's most famous for writing these a trilogy of popular historical novels, these 3 series of historical novels, and each of these series focuses on a different aspect of Korean history. In Korean history, the last 100 years, as I'm sure many of you know, has often been very turbulent and at times very tragic. And the first series Cho wrote was called the Taebaek Mountain Range. That covered the 5 years between the liberation of Korea from Japanese colonial rule in 1945 to the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950. The next series he wrote was called Arirang, and that goes back in time and starts in 1910 and goes up to 1945, and that's about different Korean people living during the Japanese colonial period. And then he followed that with another series called Han River, and that's also about Korea's modern history. And each of those series contains over 10 volumes, so these epic series about Korea's history over the past sort of 100 years. But as far as I know, none of those books have been translated into English. I certainly haven't seen them. There might be little sections or excerpts translated here and there, and I guess they haven't been translated because it's such an epic undertaking, right, to translate 10 volumes of a series, and then are these things going to sell to an international audience? I'm not so sure. But anyway, despite the abundance of books that he's written and this huge popularity he has in Korea, his books have been reprinted dozens and dozens of times. He isn't that well known to English readers, and this is despite the best efforts of his translators. Bruce and Juchan Fulton are his regular translators, and they've translated, a few of his books and short stories. But he's not as well known to international readers as some of the younger and more contemporary Korean writers are. But anyway, today we're going to look at one of his works that is available in English, The Human Jungle. This is probably, well, definitely his most, substantial work that's available in English. We have How in Heaven's Name, that's a short novel. We have a short story called The Land of the Banished. And there's another novel as well, which I haven't read yet, called Playing with Fire. But this is definitely his most substantial work that's available in English. Definitely the longest anyway. And like I said, it was originally, I think, serialized in a newspaper, and then it was published as these 3 novels. And apparently, I tried to confirm this, but according to the Amazon, so take it with a pinch of salt, apparently each of the Korean volumes sold more than 1 million copies, which, if true, it really is quite remarkable. So Cho is clearly, he's very popular with readers here in Korea. People are obviously very interested and invested in these novels he writes about Korean history and aspects of Korean modern history. So it's interesting to see the type of thing that he writes about. Most of the books that I've reviewed so far, in fact, I think all of the books that I've reviewed so far on the channel, they're all set in Korea. And most of Cho's books, most of his books, are about Korean history, but this book is about Korean characters living in China. So why did Cho decide to focus on China in this particular book? So The Human Jungle is primarily about various Korean characters trying to survive, trying to profit from the Chinese economy and the business environment in, I guess, in the 2000s, 2010s. So we have businessmen and doctors and students. Businessmen, doctors, students, and they're all trying to make a life in China. So we also have some other characters who are, contrasted with the main Korean protagonists. So we have a group of Japanese businessmen. There's a French businessman who works in import and export of luxury goods. And then, of course, we have a variety of Korean characters who work in the different industries, the medical industry, students and professors, and various, just businessmen and women who interact with our Korean characters. But we're mainly following these Korean characters and their experiences in China. And what Cho is writing about is, at least in part, it's about the rise of China as the world's most significant, the biggest economic force, and its sort of development as one of the most influential countries on the world stage. And what he's interested in is the relationship between China and Korea. And he sort of dramatizes the different types of relationships, the different types of exchanges that are happening between China and Korea through these characters. So we see the different types of business relationships, with different types of friendships, and the different types of romantic relationships. Well, one romantic relationship. And so he's writing about, in a way, he's also writing about the political relationship and history between China and Korea. It's a big, sprawling novel that takes in some of China's recent history. It tries to offer a panoramic view of modern China, locations. It's really based in the cities. It doesn't go outside the cities. But the locations include Shanghai, Beijing, Xi'an, Nanjing. And there's a nice description on Amazon from the book blurb, which says, it summarizes it quite nicely. It says, readers will see the rapidly changing urban landscapes, struggling migrant workers, Korean manufacturers trying to get rich, elite venture capitalists, con men, and various gangster types that populate modern China. That makes it sound a little bit more engaging than this book actually turns out to be. Anyway, who are our main characters? So the main character is a Korean doctor who's trying to, build a successful life for himself in China. Why does he go to China? Why does he go to China in the first place? So there isn't really one overarching storyline for this book. We meet these sort of several interconnected characters. They're going about their various activities, and we see what happens to them in the Chinese economy. What does China do to them? How does the business environment in China treat them? And this first character we meet is this doctor. He's a plastic surgeon. His name is So Ha-won. And he's a very successful plastic surgeon in Korea, but he leaves Korea because his reputation's been damaged by a lawsuit, which he feels like he was unfairly maligned in this lawsuit, but he can't really practice anymore. His reputation's destroyed. So he leaves his family at home in Korea. He relocates to China to try his fortunes in Shanghai. And at the beginning of the novel, he's optimistic, but obviously he's filled with anxiety about his prospects. When he's in China, he meets up with an old friend called Chon Tae-gwang. Chon's been living there in China for over a decade. He seems to present himself as an insider, and he's going to show him the ropes of starting a new business and starting him a new medical practice in Shanghai. And so, there's an interesting incident at the beginning of the novel which, sets up the theme of the novel, or a way of thinking about the novel, or what Cho's perhaps trying to say. So we have these two old friends. They've just been reunited. They're driving through Shanghai's, the sort of the concrete jungle, the human jungle of skyscrapers and, heavy traffic. And there's a man, a Chinese guy on a bike, and he pretends to get knocked off his bike in front of their car. And So is initially shocked, oh my gosh, we must help this man. But Chon sort of looks at him, he's very cynical, and he says, look, this guy, this cyclist here, he's only pretending to be injured, right? He's after a payout, he's after some money. And Cho, the writer Cho, novelist Cho, he seems to be saying, welcome to modern China. This event happens at the beginning of the book, and he's sort of saying, welcome to modern China. It's a land of con men and grifters, where everybody is on the make, right? And that theme or idea kind of plays out over the course of the novel in a couple of different ways. But there's another big storyline in the novel, and that's a cross-cultural love story, right? Cho has some things to say about the benefits of love across cultures. So this other, one of the other significant characters is Chon's nephew, Chae-hyung. He's a student at Beijing University, and he becomes very passionate about Chinese culture. And he wants to change his major. He was studying business, but he wants to change his major to Chinese history. At the same time as he's sort of doing this and he's deciding he wants to study Chinese history, he falls in love with a Chinese girl, one of the other students at the university. And, it's like a Korean drama, a K-drama. His family are initially scandalized that he wants to change his major. They had plans for him. They kind of planned his life out. He was going to work with his uncle and go into business with his uncle and so on. And so studying Chinese history doesn't offer him the same path to success that his family wanted for him. And at the same time, these are young lovers. They're concerned about their parents intervening in their relationship. Like, will their parents be happy that that she's dating a Korean guy and that he's dating a Chinese girl? Like, what will the parents say to this? But ultimately, Cho, he seems, he definitely comes down on the side that love is a good way of crossing the cultural divide. And honestly, it's a very, overly sweet and romanticized depiction of young love, right? It's very, very broad and not particularly nuanced in the way this relationship plays out. No one will be surprised at how the relationship goes. Anyway, this book, it also does some other stuff. It acts as a primer about Chinese culture and Chinese business culture in particular. This seems to be one of the things that Cho's mainly interested in, is talking about these Chinese business practices and he tries to weave this into the narrative. Most of the characters in this novel, they're all looking to accumulate wealth, right? The novel spends a lot of time talking about how to achieve this in China. How is this done? How do we get money in China? And through Chon, we hear about a lot of these important concepts. So a couple of them is this idea of mandi, which means sort of slowly. This idea that pressuring potential business partners to do a deal quickly or close a deal quickly won't get you very far in China, right? That's likely to backfire. And of even more importance, though, is this idea of having connections with the locals. You need to have some kind of connection or some kind of insider who's willing to speak up for you. And they talk about this. They refer to this as guangxi, which Cho sort of explains as this idea of having connections. And we see how important this is throughout the book. It's one of the more interesting aspects. Lots of deals or seemingly done deals can just dissolve because of if there was a false step or maybe one of the competitors, guangxi, had a quiet word with someone, and this can have a sort of significant impact on your ability to do a deal or do business. And we also see through Chon and various other people that cultivating those connections involves cutting people into deals and softening any tension or any issues with lavish meals and gifts and nights out and drinking and so on. And after a decade in China, Chon is an expert at playing this kind of game. He's an expert in building these connections, or at least he presents himself to be, but perhaps Chon isn't really all he claims to be. But this is how we encounter these ideas that you have to devote time to build relationships and play the long game, right? I really wanted to like this book, of course, and it does offer at times a compelling view of Koreans trying to make it in China, and there are some engaging aspects to do with how business is conducted. However, there are some significant problems, some very significant drawbacks, which makes this book substantially less enjoyable than it perhaps could have been. So the first problem is the characters. Most, if not all of the characters are very broadly drawn. These are not nuanced characters at all. Furthermore, all of the Korean characters are noble and kind and self-sacrificing. They're respectful, decent and hardworking, and they always want to do the right thing. Nearly all of the other characters, apart from the Chinese characters, the Chinese characters are also portrayed quite well. But some of the other characters don't come out of the story very well. So, for example, the Japanese businessmen are portrayed in very broad, very negative stereotypes. They're cutthroat, they're immoral, they've no respect for anything or anyone. They just want to make money, right? They don't care about China or Chinese culture. They just want to make the money. The French businessman character is, I thought, unintentionally hilarious. He's this shallow narcissist who again is completely incapable of appreciating Chinese business culture, and the only people in the novel capable of meaningfully engaging with China and Chinese culture and business practices are the Korean characters, of course. But this isn't the only issue. There's lots of sections of this novel which are really only there to introduce some aspect of Chinese culture. And this is interesting at times, but it's not terribly engaging as literature. It's almost like a guidebook, like a guided tour of China and Chinese cities in the 2010s. And also, Cho's messaging in this book is very just transparent, okay? It's very clear exactly what he's saying at every step of the way. There's no ambiguity at all. And I found this to just not be a satisfying reading experience. It's long, often tedious, and frequently not terribly inspired, and was a bit of a disappointment as such. If you do want to read some Cho Chongnae, I would definitely recommend his shorter works, Land of the Banished, which is a great story, and How in Heaven's Name, which is a fantastic short novel. Unfortunately, I can't really recommend The Human Jungle. Anyway, thanks for listening. That was episode number 29.